Hello, so we're into Unit 14. Unit 14 will not have a whole lot of new material. I'll be discussing the rationale over two videos for the EI-UI strategy, which will help to you in sort of being able to employ it as well as understand why it works. And I'll also be discussing one symbolization topic, relative and restrictive clauses. I'll be doing some additional practice problems and doing review of some of the homework problems as well, and you'll be able to find those last homework reviews in the homework review section. So in this video, I'm going to begin to talk about the rationale for the EI-UI strategy, and I'll actually begin by talking briefly about Chapter 1 and 2 arguments. So if we have an argument, a Chapter 2 argument that's valid, we know what that means. To remind you is that the conclusion is true in any situation in which all of the premises are true. And another way of saying that is that there's no situation in which the premises are true and yet the conclusion is false. And another way of saying that is that there's no situation in which the premises are true and the negation of the conclusion is true. So, in other words, there's no situation in which the premises plus the indirect assumption are all true. And that means, another way of saying that is to say that they're inconsistent. If there's no situation in which all the sentences are true, then they're inconsistent. That's what we mean by inconsistent. So we start with this inconsistent group of sentences, and then we're going to apply our Chapter 1 and 2 elimination rules. And when we do so, we eventually, hopefully, produce a contradiction. And the idea here is that we start with these sentences that cannot all be true, and we crystallize that fact using the rules into a contradiction. And we have to make sure, of course, that we use enough of the rules to get a contradiction. So that's what we're doing in Chapter 2. In Chapter 3, so suppose we have a Chapter 3 valid argument. So we have the set of premises and the indirect assumption, and that's inconsistent. They cannot all be true. And so the first stage of the derivation is that we apply the EI and the UI method, and that generates a set of quantifier-free sentences. And so we start off with sentences with quantifiers in them. After we've applied the EI-UI method, we have sentences with no quantifiers in them. And then the second stage, we use our Chapter 1 and 2 rules to crystallize, to get out, we hope, a contradiction. One might wonder, well, how do we know that from the quantifier-free sentences we can get a contradiction out of them? What's the guarantee that we can do that? Well, if they're inconsistent, if the quantifier-free sentences are inconsistent, then we can, and that's just what we were already doing in Chapter 2. If it's not possible for all of the sentences in Group 2 to be true, then using our Chapter 1 and 2 rules, we can extract a contradiction. But how do we know that those sentences are inconsistent? Are they inconsistent? Why is it that they cannot all be true? Well, the idea is that it's because of the EI-UI method. The idea is that with the EI-UI method, we start with one group of inconsistent sentences, the premise and the indirect assumption, the negation of the conclusion, and then by applying the EI-UI method, we get to another group of inconsistent sentences. But the second group of sentences is not only inconsistent, it's also quantifier-free. And then at that point, we can apply our Chapter 1 and 2 rules to extract the contradiction. But so the question then about the EI-UI method is this. Why is it that if we start with a group of inconsistent quantified sentences with quantifiers in them, then when we apply the EI-UI method, we get a group of inconsistent quantifier-free sentences? Why is that? Why does the EI-UI method do that? So that's the question. In the next video, I'll answer that question.